Sydney and Tokyo are nearly 8,000 kilometers apart from each other, and both of their smart cards have a large part to play in their transport system. In this video, I'll be comparing their smart cards by looking through the various aspects, from technological to graphical. We'll start by introducing the two players and their background. Suica, East Japan Railway Company's smart card, had begun research and development in 1987, when J&R was privatized into 7 regions. Following this period, Suica was introduced on the 18th of November 2001, covering about 350 stations, or 100 kilometers of Tokyo. 110 more stations were added on the 31st of March 2002. Meanwhile, the New South Wales government's public transport system was still with magnetic stripe ticketing, but they were trying to get a different option. The T card, a revolutionary new way to pay for public transport. Just tag on, ride the train, tag off. Easy as that. Coming to Sydney by the 2000 Olympics. What's that? No, it didn't come. Not by 2000, not by 2001, not by 2002, not by 2003, not by 2004, 2005, 2006, 2007. Wait, no. It did come in 2005, just that it was only for students. Except students still need to show their paper student bus passes due to the possibility of glitches. You also didn't even need to use a T card, so its use was basically void other to be some trial for the government or something. There were 270 to 290,000 students using the system at the time, although in about the third year of the trial, only 12% of students were actually using it. Within this system, the project was costing the government $54 million, and it was already several years late. Even more late than the NIF trains, which entered service last year. Our proper commuter trial was later done with the Inner West bus region. This had a bunch of glitches, which was often attributed to the overly complex fare system at the time. Eventually the contract was terminated, and a lawsuit battle between the government and ERG, which became Videli, initiated. During this entire time, students were stuck with paper bus passes and regular commuters' magnetic stripe ticketing. I thought we were going to have this 12 years ago. Well no, you'll have it 13 years after that. Opal started its rollout in 2012, being the same year that the government massively changed their transport branding. This rollout had started with the ferry network due to its ease of introduction and just being a good testing ground for the upcoming spread of the system. It slowly spread, moving on to trains in June 2013, buses September, and trams December 2014. In September of 2014, it had about 800,000 registered cards. Opal now stretches the entire suburban and intercity networks. To express the length of this, you can use an Opal card for the entire train journey between Bomaderry and Scone, a straight line distance of around 310 kilometers, and far further by rail. You yourself, just with an Opal card and money, you can travel this entire span with nothing else. But you should probably wear some clothes. By the time Opal had settled its place in Sydney, Suica had grown sister IC, integrated circuit, systems, and compatibility with them. Nowadays, Suica can be used at about 5,000 railway stations among other places, like buses, trams, convenies, vending machines, and other places. Approximately 95 million cards, including mobile Suica, have been issued. Sydney and its surrounds are very different in geography and population density compared to Tokyo, making this intensive nationwide reach rather unnecessary, although it is interesting to note that some have thrown around the idea. Even though such a feature would be useless in Sydney, it's still rather cool to think about. However, Suica and its counterparts have other nice features that we can envy to a more realistic extent. For example, in a Reddit thread, many Sydney Sundays have noted that Suica and the IC group have a shorter response time than their own Opal system. And they're right. This comes with legitimate benefits. For example, at ticketing gates, there is often a long line of passengers trying to get through, and when the processing speed of the system is slow, it means that the through flow of the station is as such. This is one of Suica's aspects that can be praised. Generally, Japanese stations have pretty good pedestrian flows because of other factors, but the processing speeds of the cards are a big player. Going back south, Opal has a noticeable delay when tapping on and off. While not usually an issue, if the network is put under intense stress, such as at city stations during peak, processing speed may be more of an issue. Having Sydney's public transport system for quite a while has taught me this fact well. While rarely an issue, it is noticeable and is an admittable disadvantage among a robust system. However, what's the more technical difference? What is the technology behind the two, and where does it differ? Let's have a quick look. A helpful little post from the Opal card user on Twitter has told me that there's a handy little app called NFC Tag Info from NXP, the company that owns the MyFair family, which forums say is what the Opal card uses. Upon a quick test, the forums are revealed to be correct, and the Opal card uses a MyFair DesFi EV1 card. Sydney is not alone in using the MyFair chip. It's also used in London, a massive city of culture, density, and transportation. London is also a system with contactless payments available for its network, a powerful strength that Sydney shares with the English capital. Additionally, MyFair is used for purposes other than transport, such as staff ID, parking payments, and hotel keycards. Now, to the Japanese IC group. The nation uses Sony's Felico technology, which bragged the response speed coming in at approximately 100 to 200 milliseconds. How does it actually achieve this? Thankfully, Sony actually talks about the response speeds in a concise and normie-friendly video. The video describes a technology that allows access to multiple files via a single authentication key, in contrast to the more common mutual authentication processes involved with other cards. Since I'm not great in the field of RFID, I'll just take the basic numbers at face value and conclude that Felica has a shorter response time over MyFair, and therefore, Opal. Oh look, here's this little diagram from the IC forum in Japan that shows these exact differences. In a paper about the development of Suica by J.R. East, Akio Shibashi talks about the response speeds of the IC cards and how in the past it was demonstrated that 0.2 seconds is an optimal response speed for the system as people line up at the system's ticket gates. Experiments were then done with the average speed of the process being around half a second, whereas the shortest 0.2 seconds, the optimal speed. The R&D for this started back in 1990 when manual ticket clippers went under great workloads, so J.R. East introduced the magnetic and magnetic EOR card ticket systems. The latter was special, introduced in 1991, as it had not simply been a single magnetic ticket, but a building block to modern Suica with its stored fare function that Suica later merged with IC and commuter pass functions into. Stored fare just means a prepaid balance deducted by fares. The EOR card was quite interesting and had various designs and special editions. Its shape even differed slightly from Suica by having two accessibility dents as opposed to a single one. Their sales ended on the 31st of March 2005. While this pre-Suica tech was quite interesting, it's not the subject of the video, so I'll move on for today. Those later experiments that had built upon their progress eventually culminated in what is now Suica. The process was ironed out, and it is now visible in Suica's real usage that it is a much quicker system than prior. You can also just feel the difference of experience. This does mean that Suica and its siblings are better at handling large amounts of passengers, as has been proudly stated. It is important to note, though, that Tokyo is the most populated metropolitan area in the world, whereas Australia is a British convict colony that has massive deserts and intensive urban sprawl where there is any sense of urban. However, is response speed really all that matters? Is convenience entirely derived from waiting for the little light to turn from yellow to green? No, it's not. It's derived from what you can use to tap on and how multi-purpose those things are as well. For example, in Sydney, you can use a debit card in place of an Opal card as well as at various shops. However, you can't currently do this to the same extent in Japan, unless you count a Suica card as its own kind of card. As I've mentioned earlier, the Japanese National Railways privatized in 1987 due to money things like the Shinkansen. This split JNR into 7 groups of 6 regions and a special freight operator. While these are mostly private, JR Hokkaido, Shikoku, and Freight all have public financial support. JR Kyushu even had support before, but they were able to profit themselves into private operation. As you may know, private companies are private companies. They like to make money, something that JNR didn't do too well. So what many railway companies do in Japan is not just operating railways, but also housing, restaurants, and department stores. An especially notable case is the Choshi Electric Railway, which has been reported to have had very low profit margins. To combat this, the company has sold many products that aren't just railway tickets, notably rice crackers and such food products. JR East is not an exception to this rule, despite operating the railways in Tokyo, which are huge and a dense city, so you'd think it's profitable. They sell not only tons of merchandise, but also have restaurants, a bank, hotels, and even a hospital. Private hospitals aren't anything too special, but this private hospital owned by a private railway company is a bit more intriguing. What's interesting about this whole situation is that similar multi-purpose company ideas have been implemented into the Suica system. For example, in many instances, the card is not referred to as a transport smart card or something in how Opal will be known, but as a prepaid card that can be used for many stores and applications, but of course with large focus on public transport. While you could argue that this makes it very convenient to use, it's also a trade-off between using a debit card that has already been accepted in many other areas and using an IC card, which has grown significant traction in its compatibility for payment opportunities, but is still limited in many scenarios. Sydney's government had decided to make the system compatible with contactless payment from the start of its introduction. You can now use the Opal network with an Opal card, a debit card, a credit card, or a phone provided you have payment source with it. It makes it very convenient as you can use these payment methods in many, many Australian scenarios, and Japan just doesn't have debit card support. Although to be fair, mobile Suica is an option and has been expanding in its reach since the initial option in 2006 for eligible Osaifu Keitai phones, an IC card service provided by Docomo for Japanese phones. 10 years later, compatibility of Apple Pay for Japanese sold iPhone 7s and Apple Watch Series 2 devices was introduced. Devices iPhone 8 and Apple Watch Series 3 onwards were given support for Japanese IC networks, meaning worldwide coverage for the feature. Furthermore, in 2018, Google introduced support for Suica with Osaifu Keitai eligible phones on Google Pay. Opal, as mentioned earlier, has had this in around the same time region as Japan was starting to get the treatment, and that was in 2019. Suica and many Japanese railway companies' far reach on e-money is an interesting matter, although you can settle on the fact that JR East has gone very big on it. So much so to the point that on the 22nd of July 2014, Nintendo had updated the Wii U and new Nintendo 3DS to have support for Suica on the eShop. This was unfortunately removed on the 18th of January 2022. However, it really shows how important Suica has become, though I mostly included this fact because it's really amusing. With this reach, Suica has become very important, and so have many other IC cards released by other Japanese public transportation companies that are often compatible with other IC systems. This means that they will all have somewhat similar aspects, from the technology they use, Felica, to the lack of ability to use contactless payment. Now, never mind. Various companies are attempting to push for credit and debit card payment, even to the extent of Tokyo Metro trialing a few lines and Tokyu wanting to try it out on a Denen Toshi. Overall, there are quite a few Japanese railway companies attempting to implement contactless payment. Despite this trend, JR East has not joined in just yet, at least from what I'm able to find. While I feel that it will eventually come at some point, it still seems as if they believe Suica is more than an acceptable system by itself. Not only is it labeled as a prepaid card or e-money, but it is also known as shared infrastructure. In a JR East management vision pamphlet entitled Move Up 2027, the company talks about the system in this way. They've had this e-money system since around 2004. Now, how come all this is relevant to the topic of transportation smart cards, or as JR East calls them, prepaid cards? The way a company works and figures out its services changes the services in a large way. Not surprising. The New South Wales government talked about Opal by saying, "We are delivering a modern and efficient smart card ticketing system called Opal, followed by information on where it will cover and which transport modes." They do not say Opal is a prepaid card or some digital infrastructure. It is simply phrased as a newer and more efficient way to pay for public transport, more efficient than magnetic stripe ticketing or passes handed out for a duration of time, or I suppose the T-card. However, a private company like JR East might talk about Suica closer to the topic of finance or to the hearts of investors and shareholders. Evident in the aforementioned examples of Suica not being sold as simply a transport card, but a whole thing on its own. Though you could argue that that fact has more to do with the culture of Japanese railway companies making a profit through means beyond just railways. Companies that solely operate railways often do not profit from them, whereas Japanese railway companies do. But whether you're in the public or the private parts, I think everyone loves discounts. Something I absolutely love about Sydney's transport network are the transport caps. I could go to the Sydney CBD from Newcastle and check out literally every single transport mode and make as many trips on public transportation as I wanted, then go back to Newcastle, and I wouldn't spend more than $9.65 for a weekend, double weekdays, half for under 15s and concessions. Even more, in a single week, I wouldn't pay more than $50. While exploitable, that's also kind of a good thing. It motivates people who would otherwise take the car to take the clean, traffic-reducing public train. It's a cheap and convenient way to get around and to explore Sydney, as well as its public transport network. Japanese rail fares start at the base fee, typically the station entrance fee starting at 150 yen for JR East regions. Incrementally, cost is added for the distance bracket that you travel. This is in 10 yen increments for fares, but in areas such as Tokyo, Niigata, and Sendai, the IC card saves you a small amount of money compared to the magnetic ticket. There are also fees like the Tokkyu and Green Car seat upgrade, which can be added to Suica via machines or app. Anyways, this is only a basic overview of this fare system, and they can vary widely within Japan. Suica and other IC systems do have some sort of discount system that I actually can mention. The East Japan Railway Company has had a reward program since 2007. A version today is now known as JRE Point. With this, you can earn points by spending on public transportation served by Suica, which then gets you various items on JRE Mall, and you can get upgraded seats. This is of course not the same as the discounts you would get with Opal, though it is worth mentioning, I think. Now, it does sound a bit more like a loyalty program, which is fitting for a private enterprise. Opal rather uses a system that incentivizes travel by making it cheaper, which is important in a car-infested Australia, where you want people to take the train more. Despite the great idea, looking through the JRE mall seems quite a bit more fun, honestly. Having marketable plushies for your Transport Smart card is a lot better than traveling hundreds of kilometers in a day. Anyways, Suica also has an option in which you can put discounted commuter passes onto your card. You can go to a station with your existing Suica card or get a new one and load it with a commuter pass between two stations, working even with the Shinkansen. When you do this, it puts the pass in question on its face. In fact, you can also just print your name on it. I did that myself, and you can use English or Japanese for it. Opal does indeed have a small blank section on the back that allows you to write your name, but nothing printable. In fact, I would say as a whole, Opal lacks the machines and automation that Suica and much of Japan has. And that's not just a "whoa, Japan is living in 2050" thing, but really that they just have machines to give you a card, to print stuff on it, to unlock lockers. They just have a ton of weird stuff that's pretty cool. But Opal still does have machines of some sort, namely the top-up and single-trip ticket machines. The Opal system has relatively generous fares, and its discount system really just works in capping your public transport or making it cheaper during off-peak times. It really is just trying to incentivize public transport rather than being a fun thing extra to it, which is good for a city that needs to be pushed to use public transport rather than it being the default, which is a matter of urban planning that I think is relevant because Sydney really likes its cars. Anyways, let's talk about a more fun subject than finance. Snazziness. The East Japan Railway Company uses a penguin for its branding of the card, as well as a sort of green, perhaps in reference to JR East's logo and branding. Additionally, the penguin is used in various branding schemes such as the Suica Park in Shinjuku, or the plushies you get at JRE Mall. It is quite interesting how many Suica branded things you can get, and the fact you can get them with points collected by traveling is also quite an interesting piece of information. You can't get such things with Opal. Anyways, Opal has a much cleaner, formalized, and tamer feel than Suica. This is something many may like more, and it gives it a bit more seriousness, something totally lost in the Opal Man video. You can now say that Transport for New South Wales has made a romance, fun ship, but not very cute unlike these little animals. Having a look at the various IC cards available in Japan, it quickly becomes clear that such animal mascots are quite popular. West Japan Railway Company's transport card, Ikoka, uses a platypus for its branding, whereas Kitaka, Hokkaido Railway Company's card, uses a flying squirrel. This phenomenon seems to spread across a fair bit of East Asia from what I've seen. Anyways, why use a penguin? It's been said that the name, as well as the idea of the penguin, implies a quick and smooth experience. The name Suica is actually an abbreviation of Super Urban Intelligent Card. Opal isn't as cute, but of course it's up to taste. My friend also stated that it seemed as if the Suica penguin was staring right at them, something that the font and stylizing for Opal probably couldn't do. I personally don't really agree, especially because they're an eco main, but I can see how Sydney's cleaner look might be a bit more appealing to some. Though I think there is some satisfaction in the fact that you can get different Opal cards for different fair audiences, besides just adults and children. It's quite nice, and I'd like to note that the school card, being free, is simpler, having a My Fair Ultralight card. Anyways, that's just another thing that I wanted to note. So, what was this whole video about? I just like Suica a lot more than Opal. I just think it's a lot better of a system, and while it is a subjective matter, I think we can agree that Suica is objectively better at many things like response speeds. But Opal is actually a lot better in terms of contactless payment methods, and yes, I know that's like more of an operator and station to station, line to line kind of thing, but Opal is a pretty unified system and it does have pretty good reach for contactless payment. I guess you could say IC cards kind of unify the regions that it serves, but many say contactless is the future. I just wanted to bring up a bunch of random points about two smart card systems I find interesting and doesn't make any real point. If I have to say something conclusive, I like a lot of Suica's functions, but for Sydney's needs, Opal's satisfactory. Though I think I prefer Suica a lot more. The color's nice. Hope you guys enjoyed. This was definitely not a full video on either Opal or Suica. It was just a quick comparison from someone who lives in Sydney. Thanks, guys. I'm Conley. Yeah, see ya.